not record tests, but we do have folks write pretty extensive narratives about your tests and work with a test coordinator. And again, it's a really great way to serve the community. So I'll put my email in the chat. Would love to talk to folks who want to get involved in testing. If you or any organizations that you're involved in, know of other opportunities, other groups that would benefit from getting engaged in this kind of work, or want to engage with us on any of the other work we do, which includes outreach and education on fair housing to teach people about their rights and responsibilities under the law. We also do housing counseling, and we also do advocacy work to try to change public policy. So any of those kinds of things in the fair housing realm, don't be afraid to shoot me a message. And thank you for providing the time for me here tonight. And I will pass it either over to Mike or back to Lorena. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dominic. And if anyone has any questions, loses the email or anything for Dominic, the library is always happy to connect you. So feel free to get in touch with us if you want to learn more and you don't have the information at hand. So next up is Mike Ziri. So welcome and looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me tonight. I do want to give a shout out. We were supposed to have another panelist. I do want to recognize that August Heber was supposed to be with us tonight from the Office of the Administrative Courts, but some travel issues couldn't make it. So we want to give a shout out to August because we would have been co-presenting together. But instead, I'll do my best. Hello, everyone. Mike Ziri, he, him, his, the Director of Public Policy at Equality Illinois. As we said earlier, Equality Illinois, we're the state's LGBTQ+ civil rights organization. Been around since 1991, and I've been part of the organization since January of 2015. So as policy director, I've been primarily focused on our legislative agenda in Springfield. So this is 9 sessions that I've been advocating for LGBTQ+ equality, inclusion, and justice in Illinois. Previously, I had various legislative roles in the Quinn administration, working for the Department of Natural Resources and the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. So public policy and politics are in my blood. I'm also originally from Springfield, so I love policy. And Dominic, thanks for the work that you do around fair housing. It's so important. So thank you. I have a slide deck I'm going to throw up in a second, but I'm going to talk a little bit here about the landscape for LGBTQ+ policy nationally, the gains that we've made, the victories here in Illinois in the past 10, 15 years. And then in particular, I want to talk about an organization, really great coalition called the Community Restroom Access Project, and the work that CRAP, which is the acronym CRAP, has done since its founding in 2015. And then want to talk about the gender neutral multi-occupancy restroom bill that has been in the news a lot this year here in Illinois. I want to share information and help dispel some deliberate misinformation that's been spread about it. So I'm going to immediately just share my screen here. And so we've done introductions. In terms of the landscape for LGBTQ+ equality nationally, it's a really frightening time. And this year alone, according to the Movement Advancement Project, more than 700 anti-LGBTQ+ bills have been introduced in state capitals across the country, including in Illinois. Some of those bills have been introduced right in Springfield. And those bills across the country are passing the legislatures. They're being signed into law, and then they're being challenged in courts as well. To give you some context, that's more than 700 anti-LGBTQ bills in the first 6 months of 2023, compared to 325, 330 anti-LGBTQ+ bills introduced in all of 2022. So the ferocity of the war against LGBTQ+ rights is just so frightening in 2023. And we're also seeing not just these laws being passed in other states, but we're also seeing efforts to ban books in libraries right here in Illinois. We're seeing efforts to curtail the rights of trans students. We're seeing efforts to ban and restrict the curriculum taught in schools. And then this week, we're also awaiting a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in the 303 Creative case about First Amendment rights, non-discrimination protections, and will the court, establish any kind of right to discriminate in public accommodations laws. So that's the national landscape. And undergirding this also is a fight for bodily autonomy, which, the Dobbs decision squarely in the fight for bodily autonomy and reproductive rights are LGBTQ+ rights. They are legally linked. They're linked by the right to bodily autonomy, the right to form our own families, the right to live our lives authentically, without discrimination, without criminalization. And frankly, we believe Justice Thomas when he wrote in the Dobbs concurrence that the court should reconsider Obergefell, marriage equality, Lawrence v. Texas, that decriminalized same-sex relationships, Griswold, the right to contraception. And so everything that we are working towards is to, protect and preserve and enhance the rights, bodily autonomy here in Illinois, inclusion and justice. So that's just a very brief snapshot of what we're seeing nationally. And it's also incumbent on us then why Illinois needs to keep moving forward. And we in Illinois, Equality Illinois, and many, many great organizations, a very vibrant and beautiful LGBTQ+ communities across the state, and our pro-equality legislators, our pro-equality champions, and our LGBTQ legislators in the General Assembly and governors have advanced justice, advanced inclusion and equality, and made it a priority and helped Illinois to keep moving forward. And that's particularly so important as more and more folks come to Illinois seeking access to reproductive, seeking access to gender-affirming care. Almost every state around Illinois has banned gender-affirming care for youth. Iowa, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana have all banned access to gender-affirming care. And so folks are, coming from other states seeking, healthcare here in Illinois, reproductive healthcare, gender-affirming care. And so we need to make sure that our laws in Illinois continue to be robust and strong for Illinoisans and for those who may come here seeking safety and refuge. And so over the past, I'd say, decade and a half, Illinois has been, leading this charge. And we're what's considered a high equality state. This is from the Movement Advancement Project. And you can see in the middle of the country, there's Illinois, right there in the middle, a beacon of equality, of inclusion, and it's incumbent on Equality Illinois, but all of our partners, it's incumbent on everyone who cares about justice and equality to keep pushing and keep moving us forward, so we can keep passing laws, the ones we see here. Like, we are the last state to pass marriage equality through the legislative process. Every state after Illinois adopted marriage equality because of the federal court's order. We are one of a handful of states that specifically require LGBTQ+ history to be taught in public schools, which is since 2019, which is in direct contrast to the types of laws we see in states like Florida. We are only the second state in the country to fully repeal the HIV criminalization law. And that's thanks to the work of the Illinois HIV Action Alliance. We'll talk about gender neutral restrooms here in a moment, but we are one of the first states to ban conversion therapy. We have affirming identity documents, including one which takes effect on Saturday, July 1st, for our birth certificates, a new birth certificate law, so that trans and gender expansive folks won't have to have a doctor's note to correct the gender marker on their birth certificates anymore. They can just self-identify, self-attest, and that law takes effect July 1st. So Illinois, has a lot to be proud of. And a lot has been happening to keep moving this state forward. And it's required a lot of partners, a lot of coalitions. So Equality Illinois, ACLU, Lambda Legal, AIDS Foundation Chicago, Pride Action, Tank, Youth Outlook, organizations across the state in every community from Carbondale, Jackson County up to Woodstock in McHenry County and Rockford. We've made this progress, but we also know that there's still more work to do. And one of the organizations, one of the groups that is focused and engaged on that work is the Community Restroom Access, which is a working group of Pride Action Tank, which is a project of AIDS Foundation Chicago. A really phenomenal working group that I got to know probably 6 years ago, I think, and has been around since 2015, and formed, it's formed of organizations, academics, advocates, a real range of professionals and advocates to create more inclusive restroom spaces, initially in the city of Chicago. But since then, this CRAP has gone statewide and been offering statewide webinars and services and policy advocacy. And really excited, they have surveyed businesses about gender-neutral restrooms. They've done educational videos. If you look up Community Restroom Access Project, Pride Action Tank, you'll find their website. And we've also all worked on policy together. The first policy that I had the great occasion to work with CRAP on was in 2016, and it was a modernization of the city's public accommodations and ordinance, the Equal Access Ordinance, which previously had language in there that could allow business owners to deny access to restrooms to a person if their gender identity did not match their driver's license or their ID, the gender marker on their ID. So CRAP initiated the ordinance to repeal that language and truly bring the public accommodations law in the city of Chicago into accordance with the Human Rights Act of the state of Illinois and ensure true access for folks to restrooms in the city of Chicago. And then in 2019, we worked with CRAP on the single occupancy law at the state level. So a law that requires, that it passed with strong bipartisan support, but a law that requires that single occupancy restrooms in places of public accommodation and in public buildings, that those single occupancy restrooms be designated as gender neutral. So it's simply a matter of changing the sign on the restroom door, in the restaurant or in the bar or in any place of public accommodation, any business that serves the public. And that law passed, like I said, with strong bipartisan support back in 2019, and then took effect on January 1st, 2020. One thing that we've all noticed since then is compliance, has not been uniform. And so one of the things that CRAP put together is this palm card. The palm card that folks can share with a business owner, or a manager on duty, or any interested individual, and say, hey, I saw your single occupancy restroom the sign wasn't updated. And by the way, this law, and this is a way to help better serve your customers. So here's some information. And so CRAP and Pride Action Tank has some of these cards, which we can get to folks if you're interested. If you want, there's an email address. I'll keep this page up for a little bit longer. If you want, there's an email address bottom of the on the right hand side there, prideactiontank@aidschicago.org. Just email Kim and ask for some of these palm cards for the single occupancy restroom law. But CRAP is getting the word out about this law. And I know I've become quite the stickler, because I will go into restaurants and establishments and I'll use the single occupancy restroom, and if the sign hasn't been converted and made inclusive, then I'll raise that to the management. Let's get this change. It's a very simple change that would really support and better serve customers and make more inclusive spaces, more safe, environments for everybody, including trans and gender expansive folks. But this is one of the tools that CRAP has created to help get the word out on that 2019 single occupancy restroom law. Since that time, we've all been working on this bill. House Bill 1286, bill to allow multi-occupancy restrooms to be gender neutral. Right now, the Illinois Plumbing Code and the Affordable Restroom Act require that there has to be a certain number of gendered restrooms, gendered multi-occupancy restrooms, before there can be a gender neutral multi-occupancy restroom. And what this has the effect of doing is it disadvantages smaller businesses who, may not have the financial resources or the capacity or the space to implement these gender neutral multi-occupancy restrooms, because you'd have to add new restroom facilities. So the current regulations really disadvantage small businesses and small building owners. And so we all embarked with, Craft, Pride Action Tank, AIDS Foundation, embarked on legislation with State Rep Katie Stewart and State Senator Selena Villanueva, and State Senator Melinda Bush previously sponsored the bill in the previous legislative session, embarked on this bill to create a pathway to cut through red tape and allow businesses, building owners, universities, etc., to adopt multi-occupancy gender neutral restrooms if they wanted to better serve their customers and their communities. And so, this year the bill is House Bill 1286. As you can see it by this headline, it passed the Illinois House in March. It passed the Illinois Senate in May, and then it had to go back to the House because there were some amendments, an amendment added to it in the Senate. It passed the House again in May, and now it's on the governor's desk. We're awaiting action by the governor. But you probably heard, if you've heard about this bill, you've probably heard about it because of these headlines. One, our House sponsor, State Rep Katie Stewart, because of her leadership on this bill and the deliberate misinformation campaign about the bill, she was threatened. She was threatened with physical harm, and she even had to cancel a constituent event in her district in the Metro East of Illinois. But she was committed to finish getting this done, and she did. She passed it through the House, as I said. But that deliberate campaign of misinformation by anti-equality, anti-family organizations led to those threats of violence. And then when the bill was being debated on the Senate floor in May, an Illinois state senator threatened transphobic violence about gender neutral and multi-occupancy restrooms. A really awful, disgusting, comments of violence have no place, anywhere, but especially in the elected body of the Illinois Senate. Several of his colleagues on the Democratic side immediately called him out on that, as did we, and then our partners at AIDS Foundation and Pride Action Tank. But you had this climate of disinformation, this climate of violent language, threats against the sponsor, being directed around this bill, which I think, begs the question, what exactly does the bill do? And a lot of words here, but very simple. I think the most important thing is this bill is permissive. It doesn't require that anyone adopt a gender neutral multi-occupancy restroom. It merely says if a business or a building owner or any entity, etc., wants to adopt a gender neutral multi-occupancy restroom to better serve their customers, they can. And here's how you do it. We establish basic parameters for privacy, safety, and inclusion. You see them there: inclusive signage, floor to ceiling stalls, no urinals, menstrual hygiene dispensing machines, baby changing stations, compliance with accessibility rules. So very, very, I would argue it's a very simple bill that allows businesses to best serve their customers and communities as they see fit. And establishes then parameters for privacy, safety, and inclusion. There's a lot of outright lies going around about the bill, and I think it's important to always say what's in the bill. This is what's in the bill, and the parameters of the bill. The other point that I think I talked about a lot is this: if you adopt or convert multi-occupancy restroom to be gender neutral, then you also have to convert any other multi-occupancy restroom that is in proximity or adjacent to that restroom. And this is really important to ensure parity. Particularly if you have restrooms that are right next to each other that are male and female, but you want to convert one, you need to convert both to ensure that parity of access. It's very simple. It does not mean every single multi-occupancy restroom in the entire building would have to be converted. I know there's a lot of misinformation about that, but this is just an issue of parity here. So I wanted to call that out. And then who does this benefit? Because one of the arguments made by opponents during the Senate debate was nobody's asking for this, nobody cares about this. This is a solution in search of a problem, and just special interests want this, which prompted a response from some senators that no, I've had hundreds of constituents reach out to me saying we want this, and these are just some of the groups that would benefit from an all-gender multi-occupancy restroom. Trans and gender expansive, parents with different gender kids, caregivers who assist a person in the restroom. Maybe they're an older adult, maybe they're a person with disability, maybe they're a child. So, I think that just thinking that this bill would benefit all Illinoisans and that privacy, safety, and inclusion are paramount purposes for the bill, really help putting to rest lies and misinformation about the bill. And then this is just as a last point here. This is my last slide, and then happy to open to questions. But I wanted to share a list of the proponents of the legislation to show you who supports this bill. The Retail Merchants Association, who represent those small businesses who would adopt this if they will. The architects, plumbers, the pipe trades, Coalition Against Sexual Assault, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation. And their voices were really important in the debate, because one of the arguments that opponents tried to make against this bill was that it would make it easier for violence and assaults. And that's not true. In fact, we know it's not true. We know what trans folks experience using restrooms, the violence, the sexual assault they experience in gendered facilities. We had the universities in support, Northwestern University of Illinois, IIT, and some others, then organizations that we are great partners with. I've mentioned AIDS Foundation, Pride Action Tank, of course, the Community Restroom Access Project, Equality Illinois, Howard Brown Health, a bunch of LGBTQ organizations across the state. But I wanted to highlight this to show who's behind this, who backed this legislation. Because the only organized opponents to the bill were groups were anti-equality, anti-family groups like the Illinois Family Institute. We're just deeply anti-LGBTQ plus organizations. But I'm really proud of this coalition. And I do want to highlight that the bill was authored by attorney Justin Sia, who, when he authored the bill 2 years ago, was a law student at Loyola. And so, really proud of this bill. It's frustrating that it was, it was more difficult than it should have been. But I'm really proud that in the end, the legislature pushed back against the lies, the misinformation, the transphobia to pass this and send it to the governor's desk. And really hopeful for the action by the governor in the coming time period to get this done, and to also show, going back to Illinois being a beacon, to continue to show other states and folks across the country that Illinois is moving forward. You can come to Illinois and be welcomed, be affirmed, but also these are ideas that other states can emulate and pass this type of legislation in their own state. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think we can open it for questions now.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. That was terrific. If anybody has any questions, please do feel free to add them either in the chat or in the Q&A bar at the bottom of the screen. In the meantime, I have a question, and that is, are there any upcoming bills that Equality Illinois is working on, or other LGBTQIA groups are working on, that we should be aware of in the upcoming months or in the next sessions for the Illinois State House?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. We are right now I'm beginning the process of developing a legislative agenda for 2024. Make sure I got the right year. But there are some things that are still always very present for us. There was a bill that we introduced this year that we're going to continue to work on that didn't pass. We decided to hold it while we heard feedback. But in Illinois, it's about reporting of diversity and inclusion on boards, particularly nonprofits. So in Illinois, there are requirements that the governor's office has to report out on the board demographic diversity of his appointments to state boards and commissions. Around LGBTQ plus identity, race, ethnicity, the status of people with disabilities, that the governor appoints to those boards and commissions to make sure that those boards and commissions reflect the diversity of the state of Illinois. A couple of years ago, there was a law about corporate boards in Illinois, corporate boards based in Illinois, reporting out that similar demographic diversity to make sure that those corporate boards in Illinois reflect the values of the state of Illinois, and that folks from diverse communities know that they are welcome to bring their full selves and all their talents to these organizations. And so we are working on legislation to do the same for nonprofits, so that nonprofit boards are held to the same standard as corporate boards and public boards and commissions. So an exciting initiative, and it's something we're going to continue to work on, with partners over the summer and into the fall, and then hopefully, be able to introduce legislation next year. So there's that component. Another component that we continue to keep an eye on. 2 years ago, we were part of a coalition that included Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, AIDS Foundation, many other organizations, to establish new learning standards for personal health and safety education, grades K through 5, and sexual health education in grades 6 through 12. We called it the Keeping Youth Safe and Healthy Act. It created age-appropriate, medically accurate, inclusive learning standards based on the national standards. For my perspective, it also the LGBTQ plus standards, including LGBTQ plus inclusion, which, in the old health standards was unheard of. So the issue is the standards are voluntary for school districts. And so there was data produced last year by the State Board of Education. Almost 70% of school districts don't teach this, inclusive personal health and safety education and sexual health education. And there'll be more data coming out in August for the last school year. And we'll see if it's changed. But, one thing we hear constantly from our partners and students across the state is we don't get taught any inclusive health education. So we continue to work with our partners at Planned Parenthood to identify ways to support districts and to make sure that every student gets the education they need and deserve and they want. I will say broadly, our policy areas that we are focused on are access to affirming healthcare, public safety for LGBTQ plus folks, particularly trans folks, and issues of economic inequality. 25% of LGBTQ folks in Illinois experience poverty. So what can be done there? What partnerships can we work with labor and other organizations? So you'll see policy areas kind of falling into those different categories. One thing that we think of when we think of public safety and the criminal legal system is how can we keep sex workers safe? Mm-hmm. When there's disproportionate impact of the law of criminalization of sex work on the lives of LGBTQ plus people, particularly trans folks. So that's something we're thinking about and being advised by current and former sex workers. I have a list of ideas it's a mile long that I get from other states, that I hear from partners. And of course, there's only so much we can do at any one time in the legislature. But it also means that the work of justice is never done. Yeah. Forward. So that's a long answer to your question.
That's a perfect answer. That's really great. Appreciate knowing about that, and maybe we can get into a couple of ways for people to support after that. But we do have a question from the viewing audience, and that is from an attendee who says, "My partner and I are undergoing IVF currently, and we're unsure about what happens once we actually have a baby. Do you have any resources that we could look at that would help us navigate the legal landscape and make sure that we're both the baby's legal parents?"
That is a great question. I'll say this, we ourselves do not have legal resources, but can totally connect you to organizations and partners that would have that information, be able to provide. We don't provide direct legal services at Equality Law or civic engagement and policy advocacy, but one of the things that I'm also good at is connecting people to other people. So my email address is in the chat. If you wanted to just reach out, whenever you feel comfortable, I can, help get some information for you. I do know the laws in Illinois around IVF and fertility were updated about a year or two ago, based on the work that State Rep Margaret Croak in the Lakeview area, based on what she was hearing from constituents, and so she updated the laws to be more inclusive of LGBTQ plus families. Yeah, please reach out to me and I can make sure to connect you to the right folks to give you the best advice there.
Great. And if you wanted to, obviously you have to put me on the same email, but I'm always looking to update our lists for LGBTQIA plus resources and legal resources at the library. So if you have any to send my way, if you get a chance to take a look at those lists and tell me if there's things missing or other things that we should add, I would be delighted to have that information from you. So thank you for that. I had a question actually related to the issue of LGBTQIA people in poverty. There are, of course, a large number of LGBTQIA people who don't have a permanent residence, who are having trouble finding housing, either for reasons that Dominic brought up, because of discrimination in the housing process, or because they have family issues and they have been thrown out of their family homes and are in the process of trying to find a stable living situation. You mentioned driver's license and changing names on them? Do you have any idea or information about how someone might get a driver's license or a state ID if they do not currently have stable permanent residence?
It's a good question. I know the city of Chicago has the city key. I would look into. I don't know all the full rules around the city key, but I think the city key ID is something to look into. And I can get you information about like what the state law is on driver's licenses and state IDs. I will say, when it comes to birth certificates, the birth certificate law that I mentioned earlier that takes effect on Saturday, one of the provisions in it is, so there's already language in the State Vital Records Act when it comes to birth certificates. There's already language that a person experiencing homelessness can get a copy of their original birth certificate for free. The fee is waived. But the same wasn't true for a corrected copy. So if someone were to correct their marker and they were experiencing homelessness, they'd have to pay the $15. What we've done with this bill, and we worked on this with Transformative Justice Law Project and the Legal Chicago House. We updated that language to say, okay, now you can also get a copy of your corrected birth certificate at no cost. The fee is waived, because I know that $15 can be extremely cost prohibitive. And I believe you can get multiple copies of your corrected birth certificate at no expense because of that change that takes effect July 1. So something to just keep in mind. Yeah,
that's really good. Dominic, I actually have a question for you. If I'm not catching you, eating quietly off screen. Aha, there you are.
I'm here.
For the fair housing training, how long does it take generally to complete the training? And is there an age requirement, like a minimum age?
Yeah, great question. So there's sort of two areas here. So there's the workshops that we do just that are to the public, to service providers, to landlords. That kind of education can be anywhere between 30 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on the topic. What I assume you're talking about more is the tester training. We were talking about recruiting
Right.
testers that would work for us and go out and do some of this investigation work with us. And so there's an application process. Usually there's a screening phone call with myself or our test coordinator. And then there's about, let's say, it's about a 2-hour training we typically do online. And then we, do a lot of sort of one-on-one guidance when folks go out on their first test about what to look for, how to spot discrimination, how to prepare for a test, how to not get made as a tester. It's sort of fun undercover work. We work with folks who are in the acting community a lot that are sort of natural fits for that kind of work. But, I've done tests myself and I'm not a great actor. So it's possible for anyone without that background. So it does take, the process takes a few weeks between getting the training done, getting people sort of situated in the program. We are unfortunately federally required to do background checks, and folks with felonies cannot do tests under a federal law that we're actively trying to get changed, because we actually have local protections for conviction history in Cook County that are really strong, and we think it's quite hypocritical that the federal government does not allow us to do that. But the process takes a few weeks, but then we tend to have testers that stick with us for several years, and there's no sort of minimum time commitment either. I think it's an important thing to kind of mention. So it's not like it has to be 5 hours a week. Some folks do a test a month, some do 4 tests a month, and everything in between. So lots of flexibility.
Great. And the minimum age is there? Do you have to be 18, 21, 25?
Yeah. So the minimum age is 18.
Okay, great. Good to know. Yeah. I might know some people who are interested.
Yeah, especially folks who identify as LGBTQ+. We sort of need folks, and this is always an interesting thing to engage in the discourse about, but given what testing is and that we're trying to capture discriminatory illegal acts, we do need folks who are comfortable stating that they may, for example, if they identify as trans, they might be folks who are not typically trans passing. We do need ways to accentuate folks talking about their partnerships or other ways of identifying what the protected class is during a test. So folks need to be comfortable with that, which can be very vulnerable. But we can kind of discuss those details with people if they're interested.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask, and this is open to either one of you. Are there ways that people watching can support this sort of legislation, be kept abreast of legislation? And in Illinois, I know some organizations promote the use of witness slips a lot. I don't know if a lot of people here are familiar with the witness slips or how to figure out where to find them. I know it's kind of an arcane mystery process for a lot of people, but if you wanted to talk about that briefly, that would be great.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to put in the chat the link if you want to stay informed. Basically, sign up for our emails, which includes our monthly e-newsletter, our action alerts that you get from me during legislative sessions saying, "Oh my gosh, please take action for this bill." And I keep saying that I keep sending it to the hosts and panelists. So thank you for sending.
That's all right. No, I think there's some glitch that's not letting you send it directly.
Oh, okay. So I didn't even think about that.
Pasting it right in for you. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. So that's a way of staying in touch with us. Also, of course, following Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. But that email list is really the best way to stay in touch and learn what we're working on. And also, we'll do emails, not a lot. We'll do emails about volunteer opportunities. So had you all been part of our list a month ago, you would have gotten emails saying, "Hey, sign up to work a shift at Chicago Pride Fest. Sign up to march in the parade with us this past Sunday," that kind of thing. Or sign up to, be a volunteer at our gala in February, which is always a fun time. And one of the ways that folks can take action is when a bill is assigned to a committee in the legislature. and it is scheduled for a committee hearing, you can submit what's called a witness slip, which used to actually be a witness slip, a piece of paper that I would fill out, in the committee room in Springfield. But now it's become an electronic tool where you can, as a member of the public or as a representative of the organization, which you are empowered to represent, you can submit these electronic witness slips, which really is just a public way of identifying to the legislators on that committee and to anyone that you or your organization supports a particular piece of legislation or opposes, to be clear, or opposes, you oppose something. And so we use it often to both, ensure that we build a diverse coalition of organizations and the legislators see that. Also, there are particular areas of policy where you want to make sure that you're having that those who care about equality, inclusion, justice are making sure that they file enough witness slips, because the last thing you want is you don't want the anti-equality, anti-family folks to win the day on the witness slips. Now, I'm not saying the legislators, the Democratic legislators are going to say, well, there's more anti-equality witness slips than there are, pro-equality, pro-family. I'm going to change my vote. They're not saying that. We want to make sure that the perspectives and the voice of pro-equality people across the state are being registered in legislation. And because I will say it is a convenient talking point that some opposing legislators will say, well, look at all the witness slips against this bill. Look at that. It's not necessarily a fair statement, but so I think witness slips are important. It's a way of showing your position. But I will also say a witness slip is no substitute for you actually contacting your own legislator. Legislator may not be on that committee, and they may never see those witness slips, even though those witness slips are all public, and you can go to any bill on the General Assembly's website and pull up the bill and see witness slips, who's for and against it. But I would just say, please, if you get a request for a witness slip, submit a witness slip, but then also, put in a phone call to your state reps and your state senator's office and say, hey, by the way, I want to make sure I support this bill, or I oppose this bill, depending on what it is. Thank you for the question.
Sure. We do have a question from someone else who wants to understand the law change on July 1st better. If they wanted to update their gender on the license, are they able to do that on their own, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're talking about driver's licenses.
Yes.
Which of course are different than, in 2019, the Secretary of State's office at our request updated their internal policy on gender marker corrections for driver's licenses. Before, what you had to do was get a healthcare provider's note that that a person was undergoing clinically appropriate treatment and should have their gender marker corrected. After September of 2019, the Secretary of State's office, they removed that policy, and now it's just simple self-identification. You fill out the appropriate form, and you pay the relevant fee, and then you take that to the DMV. And so that's the policy for driver's licenses. The policy that takes effect on Friday for birth certificates will move Illinois to that same policy for birth certificates. You will no longer have to, if you were to change the gender marker on your birth certificate right now, today, you would have to have a healthcare provider's note that you have undergone clinically appropriate treatment for gender transition, the law says. As of July 1, you will no longer need a healthcare provider's note. You will, and that could be a mental health care provider as well. You will simply self-attest on the appropriate form, and birth certificates are handled through the Illinois Department of Public Health. You will self-attest on the appropriate form. You would pay the $15 unless you're part of one of the groups that have that fee waived, and that's it. And also something else that the Department of Public Health has been doing and now, it's going to be codified into law with this July 1st effective date, is you can also correct the gender marker on your birth certificate to an X marker. So a gender neutral marker, just a male or female, but an X marker. So that was already the policy in Illinois, but we codified it with this law because, as great as Governor Pritzker is, he won't be governor forever. And, if things aren't solid in law, sometimes policies can be changed. So hope that answers your question. It was a lot of technical details, but
yes, and the Illinois Secretary of State website does have some information on the process, and so I've put that into the chat there. You do have to scroll down a little bit, but there is a name change section that you can start with. And Illinois Legal Aid online.org. Illinois Legal Aid. So IllinoisLegalAid.org is the Illinois Legal Aid online website. They usually have good explainers for these processes. So I will see if I can put that in the chat too. But we do have another question for you, which is, do you have any policies that highlight and center LGBTQ youth, and any sort of anything to say on best practices for individuals and organizations that are engaging with LGBTQ plus youth?
Yeah, so we have advocated for LGBTQ, for policies that support LGBTQ youth, particularly around curriculum. I mentioned earlier that in 2019, we helped pass the LGBTQ inclusive curriculum law to require that LGBTQ plus history be taught in schools. We worked on the new standards for personal health and safety education, sexual health education. We were part of a group convened by the governor to modernize, to look at policies that support and affirm trans and gender expansive students in schools, develop a kind of like a guidance from that that school districts can follow. So there are mechanisms, there are legal policy mechanisms like that, but I will say a great organization to look at for supports for LGBTQ plus youth in schools, the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance. They do fantastic work with LGBTQ plus youth in schools all across the state, and they do trainings. They just got a new program manager there, Julio Flores. They do great work. They've been developing guidance with Equality Illinois and the Legacy Project around the inclusive curriculum law, the history legislation, and they also empower LGBTQ plus students to be advocates at school board meetings about changing policies and things like that. So I would recommend looking at the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance. They're a great organization that we really lean into their leadership on. Thinking of legal services for name changes and gender marker corrections, Transformative Justice Law Project.
Yes, yeah.
Great organization that does good work. So I just want to mention them. They're primarily active in Cook and the Collier counties, but they do really great work.
Yeah, they actually did our presentation last year on this topic.
Awesome.
So.
Great.
on name changes. So if you would like, you can go to the EPL YouTube page and watch last year's LGBTQIA presentation from them about name changes in Illinois. Although at that point, I think we were still in the process of trying to get the bill passed that would make it easier for name changes. So it might be slightly out of date, but still a really great.
It passed.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it passed, and the governor signed it.
Yes,
in January or February. Yep.
So yes, we were ahead of the times. So. But yeah, so thank you very much for that recommendation. Also, I'm trying to get their website copied down to put in the chat also, but it looks like it's they're doing a website update, so it's being recalcitrant for me, so I apologize for that. But it's tjlp.org is essentially the website. So let me just see if I can. There. All right. Well, let's see. We got one more question that has come in, or actually, it's just a thank you. And
Oh.
so I would like to repeat that. And thank you both very much for being here today to share your organization's work and answer our questions. We really appreciate it very much, and wish you the best of luck with your organizations for the rest of the year and on to the future.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. And as I said, if you have any ideas for legal topics you think that this program should cover, feel free to get in touch with me through the Evanston Public Library or through the email address that I put in the chat above. We're always happy to hear more from people about what they'd like to learn about. So thank you everyone for participating, and we will see everyone in September with a whole new list of topics.
Great. Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
night.
Thanks.
That
Bye.
was a lot, Mike. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.